So I am incredibly excited about this panel. I'm going to hand it over to John Oldi in just a moment, who is a member of our board of directors at Connecticut Sustainable Business Council. But I just wanted to express the excitement around being able to tap into a Connecticut-based company and hear from you guys in terms of how did you make these really big, audacious goals actionable within your company? So thanks for being here. And John?
Excellent, Heather. Thank you so much. And she is right. We've been on quite a journey, and thanks to everyone for sticking with us right to the end here. Hopefully you've had an afternoon coffee and you're ready to rock and roll with us. So I am very excited to be speaking with all of you and to moderate this panel and to have these two professionals with us as well from Stanley Black and Decker. I will introduce them in a second. First, real quickly, my name is John Oldi, and as Heather mentioned, I'm on the board of directors for the Connecticut Sustainable Business Council. I'm in a bit of a transition with my work situation. The beginning of November, I'll be starting to run the environmental programs at Con Edison's clean energy business. Really looking forward to that. Currently, in the last 3 years, I was at Lorero Engineering Associates, applying my environmental engineering background to support companies like Stanley and others in Connecticut and other states managing environmental challenges and sustainability issues. And before that, I spent about 20 years at General Electric doing EHS work and sustainability as well. So really happy to be here to have this conversation with all of you and to be with Gretchen and Allie. So real quick, I'll introduce Gretchen. Gretchen is the Senior Director of EHS and CSR at Stanley Black and Decker at its world headquarters in New Britain, Connecticut. In this capacity, she oversees EHS and CSR in its global tools and storage business, home of iconic brands such as Black and Decker, Craftsman, Stanley, Porter Cable, and others. She also has responsibility for climate scenario analysis and authored the company's first GRI index. Prior to joining Stanley in 2018, Gretchen led the strategy and governance for GE's EHS team globally and drove carbon and energy reductions as part of GE's Ecomagination programs. And I can vouch for that because I was there when she did all those things. So Gretchen, grateful to have you here. Welcome.
Nice to be here. Thanks, John.
And her partner in progress, Allie Valenti, who is a manager of sustainability and environmental affairs at Stanley Black and Decker as well. Allie leads various strategic CSR initiatives at Stanley Black and Decker, including the organization's science-based target to become operationally carbon positive by 2030, and its goal to deliver innovative and purposeful products that improve the lives of 500 million people and contribute to 10% of company revenue by 2030. She also manages the organization's annual CSR year in review and CDP reporting effort, no small task. Allie was named a 2018 Environmental Leader 75 honoree and was an inaugural recipient of Stanley Black and Decker's prestigious Make the World Award in 2017. Congratulations on those awards. That's very cool. Welcome, Allie.
Thank you so much for having us.
You bet. So I love the programming for today because we've been kind of digging into solutions at different levels, talking a lot about climate change, and this is a climate action summit. But the last session brought it up another level, talking about the EPI, the Environmental Performance Index, and looking and thinking about things beyond just climate, other environmental attributes. And so we're going to kind of do that as well here, just for a brief minute to talk about the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which I think, Allie, you'll get into a little bit more detail on this. But we're going to take a step up and think about that triple bottom line, sustainability a little bit more holistically, because as we know, climate change is probably one of the biggest things that is in front of us to deal with. But there are inequities in health, in wealth, in education, when we think globally, and even in our backyards as well. So how do companies think about all of those various issues and make some actionable steps towards those goals? So before we get into the presentation, I thought it would be good for us to poll the audience and just see what people know or had their experience with the UN SDGs or the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So if we could get that up there, that's fantastic. Thank you, Allie. If you're on the session, please do vote for one of these things. What's your understanding and your company's engagement with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals? Are you not familiar? Are you aware, but your company or your organization's really not engaged? Are you aware of it, but your company is just kind of beginning to think about it? Or are you in the kind of the higher tier category? We're aware of it, we're engaged, and we're starting to already take some action. Love to hear where everyone's at with respect to it. It's interesting. It's so far, it looks like either you're on one end, you're not familiar with it, or you're on the other end, you're familiar with it and you're taking action, which is interesting. Wherever you are in this journey, I think this is going to be a good opportunity for you to learn a little bit about it, and then also hear about how Stanley is thinking about it. So with that, I'm going to and one of the comments came in. These are the two groups we hope to bring together, right? And that's Eleanor. Thank you. You're right on point there. Spot on. We want to bring together people who are learning and people who have the experience, so that we can raise all the boats here. So cool. All right. So let me share my screen. Let you guys get started. So Gretchen and Allie, the floor is yours.
Excellent. Thank you so much, John. I'm thrilled to be here this afternoon with you. I don't want to put words in Allie's mouth, but we've had a lot of great discussions in preparing for this session about how we're working on and thinking about the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And this is a real-time discussion. So we're going to share with you some recent progress and some recent actions that we've taken. And what we really want to do is hear your questions and feedback. So very much a discussion. We'll answer the Q&As and the chats as we see them. John, if you don't mind doing a little moderating for us, would really like to keep this as interactive as possible. So we're going to talk about how we're thinking about the UN Sustainable Development Goals and how we're putting those into action. So what are they? So there were a smaller number of you who were completely unfamiliar with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. They are bold goals that the UN has identified, and we're going to get into specifics in a minute, that are a call to action for countries, companies, entities, NGOs globally, to both promote prosperity and protect the planet. There's a lot of alliteration in that sentence. There's a strong recognition that prosperity has to go hand in hand with environmental protection in the UN Sustainable Development Goals. They are about both sustainability and development. You'll see that hand in hand activity, I think, as we get into a little bit of details. And to John's point, they do address a range of social needs that go beyond climate. Climate action is one of the specific UN Sustainable Development Goals. But there's a whole host of other things that you'll see as well. And it's an interesting, well, just go ahead and flip forward, John. It's an interesting set of actions. So here they are. So ending poverty, ending hunger. Talk about bold, audacious goals. The UN Sustainable Development Goals, which were historically called, the forerunner to was called the Millennium Development Goals. Obviously, we've hit and turned the millennium 20 years ago. When I first started working on them, they were called the MDGs, not the SDGs. You can see in here that there's an interesting combination of both social issues and economic issues. The UN is very cognizant that prosperity and protection go hand in hand of people and our planet. So sustainable cities and communities, reducing inequality across the board, responsible consumption and production, decent work and economic growth. We spend a lot of time thinking about that at Stanley Black and Decker, and we'll get into that in a minute. Affordable and clean energy. John, your new role at is squarely kind of around SDG 7, which I think is exciting. You see climate action, life below water, life on land, peace and justice, kind of all those great things that we all want to spend our time working on. And aren't we fortunate in the roles that we have and maybe if we don't have these roles squarely, we can craft our roles to morph into working on these big issues every day with our career, right? That's an exciting opportunity for all of us. So those are the Sustainable Development Goals. There's a website that I think has been put into the chat box where you can go into depth on each of them. And we're going to talk about that in a minute, because one of the challenges is that these are really overwhelming, right? What am I personally, or even my company, going to do about eliminating poverty and assuring reduced inequality in the world? How can we take action on those bold, audacious goals? Both UN and the companies and countries who are actioning these things have translated these big goals into some really actionable tasks that you can break down and kind of get your hands around, regardless of where you come from, the NGO sector or the business sector or the civic sector. So, John, if you want to go ahead. And this is what I was just talking about, sort of a preview. So each one of these overarching goals has a series of actionable steps underneath them. And these are screenshots right off of the UN SDG webpage. I picked quality education. I'm a parent. Quality education is on my mind a lot these days, so I just sort of picked it out of a bucket. It's not a particular SDG that we've selected at Stanley Black and Decker to action around, but I thought it was a pretty universal one for us to talk about. So how do we think about making sure that each one of us have really measurable targets around which we can make progress? And what are the kinds of things that quality education comprises? And I will say that I misspoke just a minute ago. There are pieces of Pillar 1, which Allie and I will talk about in a minute, that speak to quality education, but particularly in the area of STEAM, so science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. You can see this list of 4.1 through 4.8 talk about really specific actions. Let's just pick one. By 2030, ensure all youth, well, I'm looking at 4.6, ensure that all youth and a substantial proportion of adults, both men and women, achieve literacy and numeracy. So again, a really big goal, but something that you can take action around, as opposed to just thinking broadly about, okay, what does quality education mean? In the context of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, this is what we mean. And this is something that you can craft a program or an initiative or a set of goals and targets, like we've done at Stanley Black and Decker, around to try and impact those numbers. So this is really how you get from aspiration to action, I think, on the SDGs. Go ahead, John. So how do you do that? How do you pick, right? 17, if one of those 17 targets had, what was it, 8 or 10 specific elements under it, how do you know what's going to work for your organization? And this is a kind of a thought bubble picture that I'm putting in front of you. But the way that we think about this at Stanley Black and Decker is what's material. So we can talk about materiality in a minute. I know John's a passionate advocate for materiality analysis. But we think about materiality through the lens of our purpose. About 4 or 5 years ago now, Stanley Black and Decker, at the onset of our new CEO, Jim Lurie's tenure, excavated its purpose. And we use that verb really intentionally. Your purpose with your company or the organization you're a member of, the Connecticut Sustainable Business Council, could be your non-governmental organization or any kind of an entity that you're a member of. Your organization exists for a reason, right? It's not haphazard. We've lasted for 175, Allie, I think it's 170 something at this point, years, because we have been true to our purpose for all those years. And until recently, we as a company couldn't articulate what that was until we went and really looked through historical archives and interviewed anthropologists and interviewed people who'd been with the company and people who just walked in the door. And our purpose at Stanley Black and Decker is we are for those who make the world. And if you think about those brands that we referenced at the beginning of the discussion, that's what we do. And there are other pieces of the company that you may be less familiar with, but are also for those who make the world. So when we overlay SDGs with the fact that we're a global company with 62,000 employees around the world, we think about our culture, which is about accountability, really more than anything as I reflect on it. and we funnel that through the lens of our purpose, there were a couple of topics that are associated with SDGs that kind of came out the other side of that whole analysis as things that are incredibly actionable for us, things that would be natural for us to have a voice in public discourse on because they were true to who we are as a company. And that's sort of where this whole notion of our CSR strategy came from. When we think about the issues in the world, who we are as a company, and what's really true to our core about for those who make the world, that's where we ended up with the CSR strategy that maps back to a number of the Sustainable Development Goals. So I could talk about purpose for a month, but that's not solely why we're here. We want to help all of you action around these SDGs. So I'll go ahead and flip forward.
Can I just interject a question at this point, Gretchen, just because I think it would be helpful maybe to even dig in a little bit more here. So when you guys did this analysis and you interviewed anthropologists, you kind of thought about the company and its history and what you do, did you also kind of include like a stakeholder engagement process and thinking about, what is important to your customers, to your employees, to the communities that you work in, as you thought about your overall purpose? Because it's not just the products necessarily that you make, but it's the way that your company, it's the way they're made and the impact that you have on the people that work there. Can you explain a little bit more about that process?
Sure. So full disclosure, I wasn't here, Allie was, so Allie, jump in at any time. The interviews that were done were both internal and external, and the research came out of not just our own materials, but some of the public archives in the city of New Britain. If any of you are familiar with Stanley Black and Decker and have spent any time in New Britain was really founded around the Stanley Black and Decker tools, or at that time, the Stanley Works tool factory, which was right downtown in New Britain. And we still make tape measures there to this day, 175 years later. So we thought about not just internal and external stakeholders, but also where the world was going, right? You think about what if you're making big commitments that you're going to stick to for ours to go out to 2030. What are those global trends that are going to change the way we operate, are going to impact our customers and the markets that we serve during that same time frame? And so this whole purpose excavation wasn't just backward looking. It also was external and forward looking in the context of, okay, we've been around for 175 years. One definition of sustainability is last, right? How are we going to push forward, and being mindful of where those global trends are going and what thought leaders are saying about them was a critical input to this process. I'm sorry if I didn't highlight that, but there was certainly an internal gazing and definitely an outside and forward looking piece of this. It was kind of a combination of both.
Yeah, and Gretchen, an easy way to look at purpose is it's the sweet spot between what the world needs and what we're really good at. And so that kind of becomes our purpose.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And you mentioned one aspect of sustainability is the longevity of a company. And a lot of, even especially from a climate perspective, investors are asking companies these questions because of that very fact, right? If you're not addressing and thinking about those risks over a longer term, why should I invest in your company at all? And so I just think I'm glad you brought that up. It's an important point when we think about SDGs, sustainability, running a business, and thinking about not just the next quarter, but 100 quarters from now.
Right.
And I think that's what you're describing.
And one of the nice pieces of the SDGs are, let's be honest, none of those things have been fixed in the past, unless you watch a whole lot of Star Trek. And they've been around. These are persistent global issues. And so committing to contribute to their resolution is an act of sustainability in and of itself, because these are a heavy lift. They're not going to be fixed tomorrow. So, and some of them are really endemic to the societies that we live in.
All right, cool. So this is great. This is all theory, great ideas. Let's talk about how you're doing what you're doing.
Let's talk about what you're really doing.
Let's get into brass tacks. Okay.
Into the weeds.
Next page. There it is.
So you're right. So what does that mean for Stanley Black and Decker? So we have a 3-pillar CSR strategy, and it's easy for me to get into some SBD speak here. So pull me out of that, John, if I get a little deep. If you think about these 3 pillars, just in terms of what you've been hearing all day, this is really people, product, planet, right across the line. But we think about them with very intentional words. So our first pillar is about people. It's about empowering makers. And our goal there is to enable 10 million creators and makers to thrive in a changing world. You think about the SDGs that touches, and I did misspeak earlier, quality education is a piece of that. And decent work and community growth is a piece of that. So some of that is internally focused. How do we upskill our own employees to deal with Industry 4.0 and all of the revolution that's coming in manufacturing, additive, 3D printing? What does that mean for a company that's made tools for 175 years and its workforce? And then also think about what you see when you go into Lowe's and Home Depot. Right, the people that are consumers, not our end users, their roles are going to change as well. They are the creators and makers that we support with our product. So how do we help them skill up for building houses differently than was ever done before? Right, there are firms out there that 3D print houses. You may not need necessarily a Stanley tool to do that. So how do we both sustain our business and help our consumers adapt to that dramatic change? That's really what that first piece of the process is about. Innovate with purpose is about our product strategy. And our goal there is to innovate our products to enhance the lives of 500 million people. These are really big numbers. And Allie's got a lot of great specifics on how we track them. So we've addressed 2 SDGs here. Some of this is about sustainable, responsible consumption and production. And John, I know you wanted to talk about circularity a little bit, and also how we reach back into our supply chain. We can talk about that a little more. And then the third one is what you commonly think of when you think about climate change, specifically create a more sustainable world. We have committed to be carbon positive by 2030, send 0 waste to landfill, and then set and meet context-based water targets. And then there are a whole host of SDGs that attach to that piece of our strategy. So when we think about these things, when we talk about them with the board of directors or the very senior leadership team of the company, which our boss, Allie, and my boss gets to do really often, actually, they talk about them in this context, right? The folks that are really leading the strategy for the company understand these commitments. They made these commitments. They stand behind them. And understand how they deal with these global SDG issues. All right, onward.
Yeah. So, we're gonna get into some more detail on some of these.
Allie's got the you know me, Tom. Allie's got all the detail.
I'm gonna
jump in.
I'm gonna deep dive.
All right, cool.
We're gonna do a deep dive in 2 specific areas that'll help you understand how it might work for you.
Perfect. And I just want to remind folks that feel free to drop a question into the chat box. I'm monitoring that. So as we go along, if there's a natural stopping point, we can interject there as well. So, all right, cool.
Great. So I'm going to talk about the Innovate with Purpose goal, which is addressing unmet societal needs, which Gretchen just touched upon. So this is, we want to positively impact 500 million people with our products by 2030. And we have defined those products as products with purpose. So internally, we refer to this goal as the products with purpose goal. And by 2030, we also want to have 10% of our revenue come from those products with purpose. So I'm going to talk about how we define those products with purpose, how we choose them, and then how we track them. And I'll also go into an example of a product with purpose that we're really proud of that started this year. So if you want to go to the next graphic. So there are 3 categories that we use when defining a product with purpose. And let me take a step back. When I say we, I mean we have a committee of 5 individuals that sit within the businesses. They're part of a bunch of different functions, and they represent all of our businesses. And so that committee votes on every product application that we receive. And that vote is what determines its majority rules. And that is how we determine what is considered a product with purpose. So we hope that our committee is diverse enough, and that that process really keeps us humble, and that we're really choosing the right products of purpose. And we also track the reasoning why each individual committee member votes the way that they do. So we have a record of all of that. So that's kind of the governance behind products of purpose. And the definition are these three categories, which we just pulled up. The first of which is contributes to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So it's funny when we talk to these businesses and they're like, how do we get products of purpose? How do we apply, like which products? We actually point them to the UNSDGs and we say, this is a great place to start. Like, look at these targets, look at these, the goals themselves, and see where your business can have an impact, and see which product applies to which goal and which target. So that's the first category. And each of these categories have different levels. So the first level is the weakest of the three levels. So for example, this one here, the first level is that it affects at least one SDG. So if you're not affecting any SDGs, don't even bother applying for this. Your product is not going to pass the definition. The second level is 2 to 4 SDGs. The third level is 5+ SDGs. And then the second category is whether the product addresses an unmet societal need. So we actually look toward the Social Progress Indicator, and they are a nonprofit out of Washington, D.C. And what they do is they look at companies, they look at countries and how well that country is performing in different social areas, such as quality education, such as access to clean water, shelter, etc. So they really, they're looking at what type of social progress has this country had. And so the way that products apply is wherever you're going to sell the product mostly is the country that we look at. And if your product can address an issue that is ranked in the bottom third of those social issues for that specific country, then we know that your product is going to be very impactful for that country. So that's kind of how we rank whether and decide whether the product is actually going to address an unmet societal need, because there are certain societal needs that are needs in certain countries but they're not needs in other countries. So that's really important to us. We want to make sure that we're not, greenwashing in any way. And so the third definition is whether the product achieves innovation. And we follow the ignition framework of innovation. And that discusses 4 types of innovation. We only accept 3 for the purposes of this application. Level 1, which is the lowest level, is new market innovation. That's modifying existing solutions for new markets. Level 2 is disruptive innovation, which is a low-cost alternative enabled by new technology. And level 3 is integrative innovation, which is multiple jobs done in one elegant solution. So not only do we want these products to have social benefits, we want them to also be innovative, which is the whole goal, right? Innovate with purpose. So if you go to the next graphic, John.
If you don't mind me asking, we had a question come in, and I think it'd be good at this point just to poke it. I think it'll be a quick response, but does evaluation, Craig Patton asks, does evaluation of a product's revenue and profit potential come before or after the Innovate with Purpose voting cycle?
So that's not a part of the application really at all. We only use that information to track the product once it's been approved as a product.
That is the correct answer, Allie. Thank you. I figured that was the answer, and so that's why I wanted to get it out there. Let me just also first say, wow, you guys have quite a process here. This is this is detailed and impressive and hard to shake down. So I'll let you.
Sure. Yeah, it was a lot of fun to put this all together. A lot of thinking. And so this is our progress towards our goal. So we really think that this is going to ramp up as we get closer to 2030. And that's because we're planning on doing a lot more collaborations, which we think will provide a lot more impact. So you could see last year we did 205,000 people positively impacted. And this year we've already really surpassed that. So we are well on our way towards achieving this goal. And if we move to the next graphic. So this is a product that we're really proud of. It is a powered air purifying respirator. And this was a partnership that we did with Ford and 3M. So what you're seeing here is a portable respirator, and it has a hood and a face shield. And it also has a high efficiency filter system. So it can provide clean air supply for up to 8 hours. And this design, which was designed by Ford, uses just a plain old off the shelf DeWalt battery. And it actually has a custom wiring harness that's engineered specifically for this design so that you can easily exchange battery packs for recharging and continued use. So this was something that came about due to the pandemic. And you can see in the top right, those are the SDGs that this product contributes towards. And so when we talked about the SDGs that this whole pillar contributed to, there were only 2, I think, on there, but you can see the flexibility that we have with all of these different products, that we really can hit all of these SDGs if we're creative enough. So what I wanted to go into now is the social impact calculation. Oh, sorry, if you can stay on that slide. The social impact calculation for this specific product. So this is a little bit technical, but I thought it really illustrated the great thought that we put into these numbers. We really don't want to greenwash. We want our system to be valid and well respected. So the social impact calculation for this respirator. Obviously, it positively impacts the person wearing it, so the healthcare worker that it protects. And when we think about the life cycle of this product, it can be used continuously for up to 14 12-hour shifts. So the typical schedule for a nurse is 3 12-hour shifts. So we looked at it on a weekly basis because we're tracking how many weeks each individual product is in service. And we expect them to be, out of service once the pandemic is over. So that means that for every week, this product protects 4.6 healthcare workers. And then when we think about patients, we think about how long does a patient stay in a hospital? So on average, a hospitalized patient stays for about a week. And then we think about how many nurses care for how many patients. So it's about a 4 patients to 1 nurse ratio, which I think is very conservative considering some of the situations in the hospitals during the pandemic, but we're going to stay conservative. We're going to stay with that 4 to 1 ratio. So if we think 4.6 healthcare workers per week, 4 patients per worker, and we do it per week, that's about 23.3 people per week that this product is helping. And we're very proud of the impact that this product has had. It's actually impacted over 3.6 million people since it was launched. So you can see our numbers from last year. It sometimes all it takes is one product and you just kind of skyrocket in terms of impact.
Where are
So
you
that's
guys? Where are you guys selling this, Allie? Where is this being sold? Is it primarily in the United States, or are there other countries that are receiving this product?
That is a great question. I want to say the United States. But we do have some, I could try to put together some, I have a link actually. I could send if anyone, can I just put this in the chat?
Yep.
Okay.
Is there some press on this one somewhere?
Yeah, this was our press release, and I probably should have looked into it a little bit better. But
Yep.
Yeah, if anyone's
It's
interested, they can read more.
Cool.
Awesome. So should we pause? Are there any questions on products of purpose? Anything to talk about?
Yeah, there was one other question that came through that maybe you can give a quick response with respect to training employees on the SDGs, or was there a process that you guys went through in terms of company culture to normalize, socialize the SDGs, since it is, kind of embedded now to some degree within your pillars? What was the process that you guys went through there?
I was going to speak a little. Do you want to? I was going to talk a little bit about the training that Dan had done with the engineering teams. He did. So Dan Fitzgerald is our product sustainability person, and he put together a really interesting training program for all of our engineers across the company. And we do more than just tools. So there's a whole bunch of different pieces of this. To get them thinking creatively about how to do white space innovation and how to use the SDGs as something to key off of as part of that process. And that happened, I think, within the past, because I was going to go down to Towson for it. It was probably last fall, pretty recent. So this isn't something that we had started a long time ago. But the more that folks, I think, see the success of products like this, the more our engineering teams kind of start thinking about it. Also, we have a group of people who sit outside of any business unit who do innovation, out of the box innovation, big thinking stuff. And they're very much driven by the SDGs. I don't know, Allie, if you want to add on to that at all.
Yeah, and I think the way that our governance mechanism is set up now for this pillar is we have meetings with every business. I think I maybe mentioned this. So every business unit meets with the this pillar 2 governance team. We all sit on the corporate social responsibility team, and so this is where we start. Like, we socialize them with the definition and tell them to look at the SDGs. And so from a product of purpose perspective, that's how we're getting the word out.
Perfect. Great. Thank you. Shall we go to the next slide?
Sure. Right. So carbon positive. We have a goal. We have a science-based target actually to be completely carbon neutral by 2030. So that means 0 scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. And we've added onto that our own goal to be carbon positive. And that means that we're going to eliminate additional emissions through carbon capture or other types of carbon removal technologies. So this is a goal that we're actively pursuing now. So if you want to click on the next graphic, I'll show our progress. So this was our progress to date. This is from our year in review last year, 2019. You can see we're consistently reducing emissions. 2015 is our science-based target baseline. It doesn't really matter because we're going to 0. It doesn't really matter what our baseline is, but that is where we started. And we the yellow line is us rebaselining a little bit. But you can see how we've consistently reduced. And then the next graphic is going to show our reduction breakdown. So we determine how much we've reduced our emissions, And then we look at that reduction and we say, okay, how did we do that? So a major tool of ours right now are renewable energy credit or certificates, or energy attribute certificates. EACs is how they're kind of known internationally. We source green E RECs only, and we purchase them unbundled. So we purchase them somewhere in the United States. The Greenhouse Gas Protocol says that you have to apply your RECs based on the country. So we purchase somewhere in the United States, and then we apply it to our electricity load when we do our greenhouse gas, our carbon accounting. So another piece of that pie is market-based methods. And this consists of supplier and utility specific initiatives, such as green contracts with an energy supplier. Or in this section, we also consider when our sites purchase RECs on their own, that gets thrown into unbundled RECs on their own, that gets put into this piece of the pie. The blue piece, the energy attribute certificates, is a corporate purchase of renewable energy, or of renewable energy. And then that gray slice is our projects. And we have a system called EcoSmart. And what we use EcoSmart for, it is essentially a budget for long-term ROI projects. So on-site solar, for example, that has a payback period of 8 years, 9 years, 10 years, that isn't going to make it through our normal FAR process. So we have a special bucket set aside for those types of projects, and the sites submit those, and we choose which ones to fund based on impact. So this is what our emissions reduction looks like now. And if you click through, probably twice, yeah, it'll show you what we're hoping to get to in 2022. So we would like to transition to VPPA certificates. So we would like to take some of those unbundled RECs that we're buying and start to receive RECs from a virtual power purchase agreement contract. We're transitioning into this. Buying unbundled RECs is great, and it's a great starting point. But now we'd like to transition and get credit for some additionality. We want to actually start to green the grid. That's the whole point of this create a more sustainable world goal, is that we actually have an impact. So VPPAs is the tool that allows us to do that. So right now we are choosing a consultant for our VPPA RFP process, and hopefully by 2022, we can have signed on with a project and can start receiving RECs from that project. So if you click one more time, that's where we're going with this goal. We're in a pretty good spot, but we really just want to make our reductions a little bit more impactful with additionality, and we want to continue these EcoSmart projects because they really do help the sites out, and we think that they're really impactful.
Very cool. So I haven't seen any questions come through on these topics yet, but I did have one, and I think it might have to do with the EcoSmart, but more specifically with respect to on-site renewable generation. Have you guys looked at that kind of holistically and opportunity space? And I know some of those rules are kind of changing state to state, and it can be kind of complicated, but do you see that as another sort of 8% kind of piece, or are you allowing that to just happen organically within the context of everything else?
So with EcoSmart, we are having it happen organically. So the sites come to us with suggestions. They say, we'd love to put solar on our building. This is the proposal that we have from a contractor, and this is the amount of carbon that it'll reduce, and then we look at those, and then from there we look at those projects and we say, we kind of almost rank them by carbon reduction. So we want to fund the most impactful projects first. But in some ways it is like an employee engagement piece where they are to go out and find the projects, and it allows them to be really impactful.
Cool. I just had a question come in. I think this is a good segue. What about efficiency at your factories? Are there opportunities to cut on the demand side? This is a question from Jim Fritz. Is that included in the EcoSmart kind of project portfolio?
So, Allie, I'll take that one. So we actually have been measuring energy efficiency as calculated unit of energy per hour worked for years. And we have set targets around that. And I think right now we're at, and I'm gonna pick the wrong number, but like 23% improved over a 2015 baseline. So each of our plants, which means manufacturing facilities, distribution centers, even our offices, are measured on their energy efficiency. And that is included in the accountability process that each one of our site leaders goes through and reports up on a monthly basis. So we're measuring energy efficiency, water efficiency. Those are kind of, we think of those as table stakes environmental goals that each of our sites, each of our plant leaders are held accountable for. And these are sort of the overarching CSR strategy umbrella that everything's under.
So there's already a bit of an incentive through the measurement process for them to identify those opportunities within their operations. Got it.
Exactly. And then EcoSmart funding comes into play when the ROI of those,
right,
don't hit a threshold, but there's still a ton of benefit to be derived.
Nice. I did have one other question here come in. This is always an interesting one. How do you or will you view plant closures and relocations? On one hand, you gain economies of scale and other efficiencies. On the other hand, there's an impact on the affected community. That's a tough one.
It is a tough one.
It's definitely a Gretchen question.
It is a tough one, and it's interesting what we're doing right now. Coronavirus has triggered a whole bunch of big thinking around what does your operational footprint look like. And so what we've done there is actually, or what we're doing, like what I'm doing when I'm not talking to you guys, is building a climate scenario analysis step into all those plant relocations. So what we're asking those teams to do is look at, okay, you're building you're downsizing one big factory and building a bunch of smaller factories. First of all, what does that mean for the community? How are you gonna continue to impact goal 1? Right? And support those folks in the community. And also, what are you doing around thinking about your long-term water basin impact, carbon cost? Are you going to be, triggering the, any kind of carbon tax scheme where you're building your factory? Are we making sure that we're using long-term energy costs when we're making process decisions about, just for example, since I'm thinking about it, whether you put in an electric or a natural gas furnace, what's going to be easier to offset in the long run? One's cheaper today, but 15 years from now, something else is going to be a heck of a lot better for your footprint and frankly, easier to manage. And so we're building in those decisions, both from a site location perspective, and then I'm also taking the finance team through thinking about not just what it's going to cost to close a plant in a given quarter, but how are we going to account for the upskilling that we need to still do in that community when we're transitioning people out of work, and how are we going to account for the cost planning 15 and 20 years down the road, since we're going to be depreciating the asset over that time frame. And it, there's a lot of, oh my gosh, I never thought of it that way. But when you're building a new factory, I think that's the best time to build in those discussions.
Nice. Great. Thank you. Okay. Let's keep going. We've got We've got about 10 more minutes. I think you guys have like maybe 1 or 2 more slides. So close to the end, right? Okay.
Yep, just 1 second. I can do this really quick, I think. So who cares? How do we report on what we're doing? Obviously, you know, we release a year in review report. We may change the name of that this year, apparently. Every year. Allie's nodding at me because she leads that whole process. She's like, and your stories are due tomorrow, Gretchen, so you have work in front of you yet today. So we release, you know, as part of our annual report communication, we release our progress on all of these metrics and targets. But last spring, we also signed the UN Global Compact. We felt comfortable doing that given the progress that we've done around human rights, labor, environmental, and anti-corruption work in the company. And it was really our CEO's idea. It came out of a conversation between a number of folks, and we decided it was really time to go do that. So one of the pieces of signing the UN Global Compact is an annual communication on progress. So we have to report on our progress on the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact and where we're making progress on the Sustainable Development Goals. And so that will require us to become even more transparent around what we're doing around the Sustainable Development Goals and the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact, which frankly are more human rights, labor, anti-corruption. There's a small environmental piece, but it's been interesting to create a network of folks across the company because we don't, in EHS or sustainability, we don't own all of this. You know, it's owned by other parts of the company. So it's an interesting working group of folks. So you'll see that this coming spring, and we're working on it right now. But that's kind of how we see transitioning this into very internally focused, all the, you know, process and progress that Allie was talking about to, all right, let's share it with the world. And from a transparency perspective, hold ourselves accountable to the highest standard that we can find, and make sure that we're really delivering on what we're committing to. So
got it.
That's where we are. This is
great.
Absolutely like a real-time update from us.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. Let me just say thank you to Gretchen and Allie. It's really pretty great to have a company like Stanley headquartered in Connecticut to be able to share with all of the other kinds of organizations that we have in the state, thinking about these big goals and these big challenges that are ahead of us, both locally and globally. I do have one question coming in, and then I want to do, let me quick do this poll, and then we'll put that question out there. So I'm going to stop sharing, and Allie, maybe you can, Allie Sorty, maybe you can throw that second poll up. Now that everyone's kind of seen the SDGs and maybe had a chance to think about how they might implement them or think about implementing them in their organization, we have this second poll to kind of see where your head's at. What barriers do you see in your company organization to using the UN SDGs to support the development of sustainability policy and goals? Knowledge of the goals is weak. Maybe you're in one of those earlier categories. Difficult to connect the dots for local action because they're so global in nature. Leadership is lacking within my company to address these goals, or leadership is lacking in the broader context of other companies and organizations on these goals. You know, certainly Stanley is one that is trying to be part of that last item and not have a lack of leadership, right? To stand up and say, you know, we're taking these things to heart and infusing them into our sustainability practices. So I'm kind of curious to see how people might vote here. But the question that came in while people are voting is, can you say more about Stanley Black and Decker, how it balances its leadership role globally versus locally?
Yeah, I'll take that. It's interesting. We have a new operations leader for all of the manufacturing and distribution operations in the company. And he has started a practice of referring to our plant leaders, our plant and distribution center leaders, as the CEOs of their operation, and has started driving a conversation around local engagement in the community, local connection with regulatory agencies. And that's a really interesting model for us, because I think historically we've sort of kept our light under a barrel a little bit and talked about, gone to the public as brands and as a company, but not so much locally. I mean, there are places like New Britain and Towson, Maryland, where Black and Decker historically was headquartered, where we do a lot. But I think the focus is changing to more of that local engagement. We've always had active volunteer teams that do stuff locally that align nicely to purpose with Habitat and other organizations. But I'm seeing more of a focus to the local, which I think is really kind of interesting and exciting, because you see people, I think of our former plant leader in Jackson, Tennessee, who really gravitated to that and did a bunch of Pillar 1 education with the local trade schools and trade organizations. And I think the pillars and the SDGs that they map to really allow you to go local and activate if it's how you're wired. And I think we're starting to really value that kind of engagement and outreach more and more. I don't know, Allie, that's just been my perspective.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Cool. One last question, since we've got like a minute left. Do you guys do scope 3 on your supply chain in your accounting, given the fact that there's a good bit of steel utilized in your products?
Allie, do you want to take that from a
Science-based
target perspective? Okay, cool.
Yes. So scope 3 emissions are part of our science-based target. So we have a science-based target right now, 35% reduction in our transportation, upstream and downstream, as well as our purchased goods and services. So that's where the steel piece might come from, the purchased goods and services. Science-based targets makes you do a 66, you have to address at least 66% of your supply chain, 2/3 of your supply chain. So that is currently how we're addressing that. And that's all about, bringing our sourcing team on board and making sure that they're informed and that they're making the right decisions when sourcing raw materials and things of that nature. So that's a lot harder than going operationally carbon positive. I'll say that much.
It is.
Yeah,
we're
absolutely.
using CEP supply chain as a mechanism to do that.
Yeah, it's kind of the elephant in the room when you talk about greenhouse gas reduction goals in large organizations. The front and the back end of that equation is usually dwarfs your operational footprint, right? And so if you really want to make an impact, make an impact here, but the other parts of the supply of the life cycle from a carbon perspective oftentimes are much more impactful. So all right, we're kind of coming to
John's comment. John, thank you for that commercial around the Black and Decker mower, and I'll just say stay tuned for more of that, because it's coming.
Awesome. Great. All right, we've come up to the end, and I will just turn it over to Heather Burns to close out the session. So thank you.
Thank you so much, you guys. That was just, I mean, my mind was just going boop, 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 boop. Really appreciate it. And I think too, you did such a fantastic job. It says, according to the poll, the two things are the lack of knowledge and lack of leadership. And I think, you just helped everyone on this call definitely get up the curve on knowledge and gave great examples of leadership. And I really appreciated you outlining the process of how you went through and determined which goals align. And I think that's certainly something that folks on the call today working in their companies can take and apply. So thank you all so much for your professional generosity today. And it's just so great to have you part of the event.
Yeah, and I'd just like to say this is Gavin Watson, and part of the Conscious Capitalism Group. And I just say, you guys are fantastic. The things that you are doing, just so amazing. Such deep diving into being super serious about it. Just incredible. Thanks.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of intensity around it in the company. It's an exciting place to be.
Yeah, and definitely don't keep your light under the bushel anymore. You got to let it out. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, take good care.